Everyone. Thank you to all the presenters so far. Really interesting to hear about the work you're all doing and how UNAOC is supporting them through the Youth Solidarity Fund and other initiatives. For the progress study on youth peace and security, so the progress study was mandated by Resolution 2250, which mandated a study showing the positive contribution of young people to peace. And we wanted to provide data and evidence of how young people, how they contribute to building and sustaining peace, which required a bit of a shift in the questions that were asked, because we realized a lot of the academic literature and research is guided by the question, why are young people violent? How do we stop young people from joining gangs and violent extremist groups and the bad guys, etc.? So we wanted to shift the question and ask, why are young people peaceful? Because the majority of young people are peaceful. And when you look at the data, where it's vulnerable, you actually see that in any context, it's always just a minority of young people who engage in violence, and that includes some of the most, really terrible conflicts of the past. I mean, if you think of West Africa and child soldiers, I mean, these were children who were forced to fight. They did not want to fight, they had to be drugged up to fight, etc. And so, starting from that data, that it's always just a minority of young people who turn to violence, in spite of the conditions that they all experience, the exclusion, political exclusion, economic exclusion, lack of meaningful participation, etc., then the question really becomes, how come so many of them are peaceful, and what are they doing? And that's really what we try to look at through the progress study, shifting the parameter of inquiry. So one of the things that we did with Search for Common Ground and the United Network of Young Peace Builders was around this survey of youth-led organizations that the survey is now going to talk about. And I think gives us a big picture that you guys have illustrated through the work you've presented.
Thanks, Cecile. Good to know what I'm now going to talk about.
Yes,
Thank you. No, it's well, just to say first, before I say anything about that, I just want to say how incredibly interesting the three presentations were. Really interesting to hear, Michael, about your evaluation and how much actually of what you found sort of, echoes with things we've been hearing directly from young people themselves, but that through your evaluation you've been finding many of the same things. It's good. It means that we're onto something, I think, and really, really interesting to hear about your experiences, Abdul and Younes, which also I feel, illustrate, we sometimes tend to talk about these topics, especially in a place like here at the UN, at sort of a very abstract level, right? But we're talking about really real things. And I mean, my background is also in youth activism and the youth movement, and the challenges that you were both describing, I identify with them very much myself, and I think it's really important when we're having these discussions that we actually ground them in that. That's what it's about, it's about the actual work. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that we did for this global, this global overview that the Progress Study on Youth Peace and Security tried to provide was to do a survey and mapping of youth-led groups that are out there. And it was a really interesting process, and I'm not going to try to summarize everything that they told us, of course, but because we're specifically looking at sort of investments in youth groups. I think there were a few interesting things that we found there that are important to keep in mind as we think about how do we invest in youth groups. So the mapping, as I said, it was global in nature. It had around 400 organizations that responded, or youth groups that responded. Out of those, half of them operated on budgets that were less than $5,000 per year. And the thing is, $5,000 per year is a lot for a youth group. Out of those half, I can't remember the exact number, but a very big chunk of them had basically just no funding, right? I mean, that's where a lot of youth groups tend to be operating. But what we also found is that these groups that don't have necessarily a lot of financial resources, they're doing really, really, really important community level work. They often have the connections in their communities. I mean, it was mentioned also, I think, in your presentation, Abidum, that they have these sort of unique ways of having access in their own communities. I mean, I work for an international NGO. I work for an international peacebuilding NGO, Search for Common Ground, which has headquarters in Washington, D.C. and Brussels, and then operates all over the world. But that's quite different from being a grassroots youth group. And you have a different type of access then. And they are able to use this access to make really, really important contributions, but they tend to peace and security, but they tend to be hampered by a lack of sustainable investment, which was mentioned in your presentations, and is really something that we're seeing is it's holding young people back, and this is a shame because if we look at the data, young people are such a huge part of the population of the world, and in a way, sort of not effectively investing in them is. I mean, it just means we're not effectively investing in peace, right? So I think it's a bit of a missed opportunity for the international community, and I think we need to look at things like, for example, the evaluation that Michael did to sort of see, okay, where are things being done well, and how can we start to replicate those and do them more broadly and at scale. But I fear that maybe I shouldn't really continue talking much longer, but instead hand it back over to you, Cecile, to facilitate the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't have a lot of time left, but there were a number of very important points that were raised around the need for financial support for youth-led organizations and the challenges and opportunities that it creates. So one thing that is well known is the fact that a lot of donors don't have funding streams that youth organizations can even access because they're not meeting some of the basic requirements. At the same time, Michael, I was really interested in your presentation that in your research you found that actually a challenging process was also really in itself a capacity building process for some of these youth organizations. So it's a bit of a fine line because you want criteria that youth organizations can meet and you want them to access the funding. So it's great when it's a capacity, when it's a learning process, but very often it's also simply an exclusionary process. So how do we find the right balance so that the mechanisms are supportive of youth participation, the type of funding, including amount, respond to young youth-led organizations' needs, that the reporting and M&E requirements. I mean, it's very difficult to formulate a peace-building outcome, for instance. It's even more difficult to say, well, we reached that peace-building outcome because of this activity we did. That's something the entire peace-building...
And then provide evidence of that.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's something the entire peace-building community is talking about and challenged by. So if you're talking of small amount of funding and specific activities, to formulate a big peace-building impact can be a real challenge. So how do we support this work? I think I would like to turn it back to the two of you, maybe for some more concrete, if you have recommendations to donors in terms of what you see for them, better ways to support the type of work that you're doing, and then we'll open it up for questions from the floor and input also on this question.
Like I've always said, the reward for good work is more work. But in this respect, we still need more money to do more good work. Okay, so I implemented a project and it was a success and it's replicable. But I am limited because I've exhausted the funding I have and I can't scale it up to other community. For example, I've worked with 6 local governments in Lagos State. We have over 30 local governments in the states. Lagos is a very large space. And we did this successfully in just 6 local governments that is just around my community. How about scaling it up when it was a success? Can youth donor organization, for example, I told myself, why is it just 12 months? Dr. Manki also mentioned it in his review. It's too short. And we all know that young people move they move from one place to the other. You can't just keep them in one environment for long. A lot of things change. Some of them move around because of better job and opportunity. Some due to marriage. Some move on to school. So yes, some of them, the few ones we've trained, will continue wherever they are. But how about the other large ones? So funders should look at successful projects and scale it up. Not only in that country, but you can even scale it up to other countries around that can work. And also, I think partnership should also come in, more partnership. Yeah, we thank the governments of Spain and Finland for doing a great job. How about other countries coming in on the table to support this work so that it can be far-reaching? So I think the period should be increased, and then it should be scalable. Those successful projects should be scalable.
Great, thank you so much.
So the main thing is with the funders is like it has to be like some funding that will guarantee sustainability for the project and also the sustainability of the organization as itself. And that's for like certain organizations that will meet the criteria, of course. But like how to reach the one, as we said, like the one that doesn't meet the criteria. So then we can encourage, like as the criteria exist already. So then we can encourage these, like to provide more funds for these such organizations in order to go and work with other like small organizations in the field, like with the youth, like small ones that you said, like yeah, they are more like deep in the ground. And that's again how we will not even sustain it, like we will empower our other youth-led organizations in order to give them the opportunity to deal with funding and deal with projects for them again to meet criteria to be eligible for other fundings, basically.
Great, thank you so much. So let's open it up for questions and comments from the floor. Please introduce yourselves and make sure to keep your comments and questions very brief so we have time for an exchange.
Yeah, so maybe a quick comment, and thank you, Jonas, for raising that. It's a bit puzzling and also disturbing that we as people who work for international organizations or international civil servants are paid to actually do good work, yet we expect young people to do it for free when they're actually doing it better than us. It's a bit disturbing, to be frank with you. And then a question to McGill maybe is, you mentioned evidence-based as maybe an important criteria to maybe help these young people document the evidence of their on-ground interventions, because this is something that maybe funders look for. What was your concrete suggestion or recommendation to them? Of course, I will look into your report later, but maybe if you could highlight that for the benefit of everybody else. And last is, maybe for organizations that cannot fund directly young people, is to at least train them rigorously on how to actually build up projects. And that should be a key component of capacity building. It should move away from platitudes to practical, concrete skills that they can use to better the organization. Thank you very much. And my name is Wani from UNESCO Mahatma Gandhi Institute.
Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Fasahat and I'm from Pakistan. I'm also one of the President Solidarity Fund Award winners from 2013. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the support that we received back in 2013 when we started the organization really on ground. And today we have more than 5 projects. And because of that funding, I always acknowledge and admire because of that small funding actually built the structure of our organization. And though it was only for 1 year, but we could actually successfully able to expand our structure, and due to our activities within the communities, it helped us also to expand our network within the young people at the community level. This is number one. Number two, I would just what I would like to recommend and what I think that can be done is, number one, for the UNAOC maybe at national level, because now I know within Pakistan at least I know there are more than 4 or 5 organizations now, and maybe there can be a national level network which may help us all, like as I think one of the speakers also mentioned, like maybe the organizations who have been working there can support the new organizations as well, whatever experience and networks that we have at national level. And second, I think there is a need to support, of course, support to the activities, but it's also important to support to the organizational development, which of course UNAOC does, but it is very much at like kind of skills level, but not in terms of as it was back in 2023. I'm not sure like right now, but I think maybe it can be a little bit more to strengthen the organization so that sustainability can be more effective. Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, I am going to ask a question to someone from UNAOC and to Miguel. So my name is Judy Kale, I'm a G20 Global Changer. I work with the G20 Research Group on policies and recommendations to submit for the G20 summit happening in Japan with the G20 countries. And my main focus is on youth, migration, and gender equality. And I heard all of you talking, and I would have loved, when we talk about peace and security agenda, to see someone representing refugees. Because peace and security right now affects refugees more than anybody else. And when we talk about refugees, the risky refugee crisis going on in Asia and in East Africa. So I didn't hear anything about the work being done in East Africa by UNAOC. And the crisis happening in East Africa, it's so amazing, but also so sad, because it's a crisis that has happened over the years, which means from Rwanda having refugees with 1994, then Burundi with 2015, but also Burundi from 1970 to 1993, then Somali, then Kenya. So we have over more than 50 million girls not in school. But my question to the UNAOC is, I work with refugees. I work with an organization that works with both welcoming immigrants that come in May. The state of Maine has welcomed a lot of Somali refugees and a lot of Burundian Ugandan refugees, but also I work on the ground in Nakivale, in Uganda, and in Mahama with refugees. The problem that we have is, first, the youth is not on the table. The youth is not even a seat at the table when we are talking about money that is needed. So we have people deciding on who to give money, but the youth is not there. Second, refugees don't have the luxury to start projects and prove how they can scale it. She can do it because she has the luxury to start an organization and go and spend 3 years working on how to prove you that she can scale it. But a refugee girl that just arrived in Nakivale and needs some money probably to start in the sexual and reproductive health, because teen girls are getting pregnant, doesn't have that luxury. And when she doesn't have that luxury, it means not only we are keeping these girls in refugee camps, away from the city, and not accessing education. Second, we are telling them that they have to prove us that they are able for us to give them money. I'm not saying that we should trust them, but I'm saying what if we come up with mechanisms that involve how we are going to train them and give them the funds to do the work at the same time? Because it's a right away crisis. So my question for you is, have you done any research on what it would take to do the same capacity building and allow people to do the work right away, instead of waiting for them to go and come back? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take two more.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy for this topic because I used tender Julius with African Caribbean Pacific Diaspora Support Services in Belgium. But before, I used to work in Cameroon with young organizations who barely even have up to $5,000 a year to do something. But I decided to work with them based on my years of experience with them to help them. And I work mainly with young grassroots organizations. Concerning investing in young grassroots organizations, I believe most of the funders, like she said, the criteria, the eligibility criteria is too much. Some will ask you for example, audit report. How then can somebody who can do something, even be producing, paying an auditor to come up with something? It's not real. They find it very difficult. Even presently, I'm talking with you. Most organizations in Cameroon, due to the crisis that they are going on, I talk with them. I try to review some of the projects. I source of funding for them even now, and I try to see way forward designing projects with them. They still face these problems. So I don't know if most funders, if we can make it known, it's just comments that I want to do. If we can make it known to most of these funders that we should look, they can look at other criteria, like looking at past activities, and also looking at the people behind the proposal. It would be very easy for these people, because these people sincerely have been on the field for more than 8 years. I've seen them. They are willing. They don't have, but they are up to a level that they even expose themselves to have vulnerable situations, and now they tend to be vulnerable. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'll keep it short and brief. And I want to comment a little bit. I'll just keep it short. My name is Valentin Kamano. I'm a UN Youth Representative for Nano Campaign, and I'm also a Chief Advisor for Team Joy Bangla in Bangladesh. In terms of leadership and showing support, I've done a lot of experience as well with other local nonprofit organizations. And in terms of immigration crisis, you have it's a lot of work, but we have to give them an opportunity to show that they can do it. We can support them, that those who have access to that facility, to show them and educate them and keep in touch with them on an email basis. Because even though yes, it's limited, but we have to trust them that they can do it with educational facilities and resources. Because the UN gives them resources, so we should entrust with these resources. In terms of investments, there should be proof with the organization that is doing on-the-ground work with long-term, more than 5 years, and they're able to expand on that facilities with local governments and municipalities. If they're a civic servant in that local community, that guarantees them that the investor can trust this youth that is on the ground, who does work but has done more of the voluntary services, and that provides them a guarantee. So that it could be continuously giving them investments. So my question to everyone is, how do we facilitate and how do you train us to be on the table to guarantee you that we are able to be committed on a long-term basis? And with the ambassadors, Your Excellencies, thank you so much for investing in youth. And how can we show you that we can guarantee you that this long-term investment will help our local governments? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good questions, several ones around capacity building and institutional strengthening. Also around the question of refugee youth, the question of migrant youth and how to support them, the question of the criteria for funding and how to relax the criteria for public organizations to be able to access funding. Also, I think a really important suggestion around lessons learning between organizations that have benefited from support and peer exchange, I think is also something that the international donor and development community doesn't use enough. So let me turn it back to the panel. I think we'll just go like that. So to respond to the questions and also any last comments you'd like to share with us.
Okay. I would like to still give it to the UNAOC because during the project during our project implementation, to be candid, yes, when we come on the table, we supported us. When we have challenges and we go to them, they give us way forward, and they also brought all of us that are YSF recipients for that year together for capacity building. Like my colleagues have said here, it should go more than capacity building or training me on how to run the organization. I still need more assistance. But for young people too, we should continue looking for this opportunity. And when we get the opportunity, we should try and use it judiciously. You see, trust is a two-way thing. Yeah, it is not easy. We've seen a lot of cases where funding organizations fund a project or an idea, and the person will sit down and eat the whole money, and then snap pictures somewhere, and then send a report in that this is what we've actually done. So some of these people have caused some challenges for the people that are really on the ground doing the real job. So now, the funders, how can you you differentiate between the real people working and those ones that, you know, they are up there and they can easily access the funds, but they are not doing anything. And another thing is, they can actually come to the grassroots and identify, because some of this money comes to the government. For example, the government in my country, when any fund comes through them, it won't get anywhere. It won't even get, I don't know, you won't even perceive it, not sort of hear about it. Then you will be seeing it on the news and that the social amount was given to this country to implement this project, was implemented, and you're wondering, am I in another country? So, organizations, funding organizations should work more with the grassroots directly. Instead of this top level, top to top, it should be from down to up. So that let the government come and meet life where they are implementing their project and see what they are doing and see that the money is already with life, not that the government is trying to come and give life and when they will not even do that. So I think we all should work to build the trust. We should also use the network we have. Most of us are opportunity to be here. Why not let us interact and see those opportunities we can share? Some of us are very stingy with information. You have access to this funding and you're not ready to share with your peers so that they won't come and disturb your own access to funding. We should always be open to sharing information when we have it, because I can't do it alone. We all have to work as one to achieve it.
Thank you very much. Donors get out of capitals.
Everyone here talks about trust and what young people can bring, and just from the interventions, it's already showed us how constructive the young people are already. And also from the whole event, when you see all the interventions from the youth, how smart and constructive are. So I guess we have now to start to overcome the trust, because we already the trust should be built. We have to act upon this trust from now on as for funding bodies and institutions. But again, the main challenge when to talk about the youth, as when the lady mentioned about refugees, so that's again one of the main things we have to think about, how to empower them as well, how to fund projects in order to sustain them within their own lives. And the other challenge is mainly again youth mobility, and how can we, because we're talking about organizations meeting, organizations exchanging experiences, but again the mobility is not accessible to everyone, even if a lot of people we know they've been even invited to previous youth events and being granted access to come and share the experience, which is a shame, and this happens in a lot of countries. The main recommendation, it just should be, as you mentioned, instead of giving funds to governments to invest in youth, the funds should go to the youth in order to invest in themselves, and that might have more impact on the ground than going from the top to the bottom, as you said.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. A lot of things I could say, but a lot of things that have also been said. So what I want to say is that I think I'm here representing, as I said before, my background really is in youth-led organizations and youth movements myself, but currently I work for an international NGO, and I guess I want to challenge everybody who's here in the room who is not coming from a youth organization, who's not coming from a youth group or youth movement. I want to challenge all of us to try to do a few things a little bit differently than how we might be used to. The first thing is I want to challenge us all to stop worrying so much about how young people organize. We so often say, oh, you need to be a registered organization, or you need to have a board, you need to have a bank account, you need to have an audit, It doesn't matter. Focus on what they're doing, right? And let's overcome our own internal obstacles so that we can support young people regardless of how they organize. That's point number one. Point number two is understand that youth groups and youth organizations aren't necessarily set up to exist forever. I mean, young people become older people and they move on and they do something else. So accept that and focus instead on instead of focusing on sort of, sustainable structures and systems and whatever, focus on sustainable impact and focus on working with youth groups that are committed to making a difference in their communities. The third challenge is, let's stop thinking about capacity development and resource support as two different things. Let's understand that for most youth groups, if you develop their capacities to act, well, you're really doing them a disservice if you then don't help them actually put those capacities into action, right? At the same time, if you just give a youth group, if you say, write them a check and say, here, go do something with this, and you don't provide any follow-up support, often these are people who are doing something for the first time in their life, and you have a responsibility to also help them out and work with them and provide that type of support together with funding. So let's stop seeing these two as separate, and let's understand that support and capacity to act and opportunities to put that capacity into action need to be connected. And the fourth challenge that I want to pose to all of us who don't come from youth groups here in this room, who represent the, for lack of a better word, adult-led organizations and groups. It's not the best way to say it, but the fourth challenge that I want to pose to us is, let's make sure that we do all of this in partnership with young people. Let's not assume that we know what young people need. Let's not assume that we can say, this type of youth initiative is the best, or this is what we should be looking for, or this is the type of support that we should be providing, or this is the right type of grant or right type of investment. Let's do it with young people. Let's be super deliberate about it. It's really hard because most of us, we've set up, we have structures that are set up in a way that decision making follows a very traditional hierarchical pyramid. Let's try to break out of those pyramids and create real meaningful spaces for young people to be decision makers within our own structures around how we're investing and supporting youth groups. That's it.
So there was a first question here about recommendations related to evaluation and impact, and then there was this second comment here about refugees. So I'm going to integrate the response for both of those. So with response to the evaluation, 3 points: framework, skills, and starting young. So first of all, as far as a recommendation, I think it would be really valuable as a field to develop a framework for evaluating the impact of child and youth peace building efforts. There should be other research that's going on and different frameworks that could be developed, but for us to have a framework that we can identify, hey, these are some key methods for evaluation, these are some key criteria, this is a key strategy that would be cross-cutting amongst a number of different types of child and youth peace building projects, so that we could have alignment, maybe have some similar tools, so that we could have really interesting analysis of data in a number of different contexts and cultures. That would really help organizations, youth-led peace building organizations, like how do we create a framework, how do we create a structure for analysis, to be able to say, well, here's something to consider, here's a framework that's developed. And one of the ways that could be done is through the Youth Peace and Security Coalition, and I believe, Cecile, that Saji and you have allowed, or will allow some space at the next meeting for those who are interested to discuss this topic. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so anybody who's interested should talk to you about how to connect with that existing coalition, and that conversation, follow up with Cecile afterwards. So if that was developed, then organizations such as YSF or other donors could say, okay, that's a lens or a framework through which we could work. And so then as applicants are applying for projects, you could let them know, like, hey, could you add some of these criteria into your analysis? Here's some great recommendations. You could still allow flexibility for them to do additional things or different things. But then you could start to get some unity, some synergy, and it would really help these organizations out in order to develop those frameworks. Then secondly, you've got to build their skills to be able to actually execute that, of understanding how do you collect data related to impact? The difference between here's evidence, here's the signature of everybody who showed up for our event. Okay, that's some evidence that you actually have the activity, but what's the difference between actually having that they were impacted, that now they're willing to connect with people that are very different from them and have some sort of peace building impact. So that's a capacity building effort. And personally, I think, I've done evaluations research for a number of different organizations, UN, other organizations traveling in peace building around the world. And I tell you, one of the things I find really consistently is start young. If you start equipping kids in gaining some understanding about M&E when they're 10, 12, 14 years old, by the time they're 20, they're like, yeah, we get this. We understand all of these things. It's more intuitive. They understand. They can actually help adapt and kind of improve those methodologies. So I say start young. And this relates to the question or a comment from Judy about refugees. And this girl in a refugee camp, she can't start a project. And I've got to say, Judy, yes, she can. Yes, she can. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. There's examples of this happening. And in my capacity as the director of Young Peace Builders, this is one of the things we help do. Is we actually have. You asked about if you have tools to actually help this happen, and yeah, we developed tools and resources to actually equip children and youth as peace builders in practicing project implementation from a young age, and giving really tiny grants too to help them matching grants to help them understand you can find resources locally to be able to actually match those resources. And you can practice project implementation and evaluation from a very, very young age. So feel free to get in touch if you want to know more about that.
Thank you, Michael. Sadly, we're at the end of our time, so I will turn it back to Vanessa. Also, there were a number of questions that were addressed to UNAOC. I mean, it's up to you if you think there's time to say a few words. I mean, I think UNAOC has provided some interesting work.
I just want to very briefly address a few questions that were asked to UNAOC. We do work with refugee organisations. Several of our alumni are working in the area. We actually do have a project also in Nakawale refugee camp and also in Cameroon. With the Solidarity Fund in particular, we actually involve our alumni in selecting the next year's recipients. So I think the learning from that is that it's also very important to make use of the network, even though you feel like you might not be able to, you personally might not be able to access these kind of issues, but also reach out to other people who are working in the area who are working on the same things that you are, and to see like their network, whether or not there's any way through them. I think also I just wanted to very brief, and also the issue about building trust. This is actually something that was brought up in the progress study of the Youth Peace and Security. It's about investing in youth. In the progress study there is the issue around having 1.8 billion in funding by 2025, the 10-year anniversary of coming to Burundi. But it's not just about the money, it's not just about 1.8 billion, it's also about providing capacity building, providing network partnership opportunities. That's how I feel like if we invest that in youth, then it's also a trust, both ways trust issue. And as Michael brought up, this is just going to be the first step for us. This event was about convening stakeholders who are interested. I hope you all left your email so that we can spam you eventually. But the next step is hopefully through the Global Coalition on Youth Peace and Security, so that we can keep talking about monitoring and evaluation, developing indicators, what are the next concrete steps for action. So thank you so much to everyone, and that's the end of the session.